January 13, 2006. Buenos Aires, Argentina. It was a quiet Friday morning in the suburb of Acasuso, an upper-middle-class neighborhood where life usually moved at a calm, predictable pace. But on this day, things were about to shift dramatically. Just before noon, 5 men calmly walked into a branch of Banco Rio. At first, no one panicked. It seemed like a routine robbery, one of many that had become all too common in Argentina during those years. The men were armed, masked, and highly composed. They ordered everyone to the ground and claimed they were there for money. They held 23 people inside the building, customers and employees alike, and made it clear they wouldn't hesitate to use force if anyone disobeyed. From the outside, the police treated the scene as a standard hostage situation. A negotiator arrived, roads were closed, and local news crews began swarming the area. It looked like it would follow the usual script: tension, demands, and hopefully, a peaceful surrender. But what nobody knew, not the cops, not the media, not even the hostages, was that this so-called robbery was just a carefully staged performance. Because while the world focused on the drama happening upstairs, the real action was taking place underground. Months before this day, a group of men had been planning one of the most sophisticated heists in the country's history. They weren't career criminals in the traditional sense. They were thinkers, technicians, and strategists. They knew the system and, more importantly, they knew how to outsmart it. One of the ringleaders, a man named Fernando Araujo, wasn't your typical mastermind. He was an artist, a martial artist, a self-proclaimed philosopher, and above all else, a man who craved a challenge. To him, robbing a bank wasn't about money. It was about proving it could be done perfectly. Araujo spent months researching banks, learning security systems, and recruiting the perfect crew. His vision was bold: enter the bank, hold the police at bay, and while the world watched the chaos unfold from above, silently empty the vault through a tunnel they had dug from the storm drain system nearby. A tunnel, by the way, that had taken months to construct, brick by brick. To the outside world, it looked like a textbook hostage situation. Armed men, terrified civilians, negotiators on standby. But below ground, something far more calculated was happening. Beneath the feet of police officers and reporters, hidden under layers of cement and time, ran a secret tunnel. A narrow, hand-dug passageway that connected the bank's vault to a nearby storm drain system. It was about 15 meters long, small, damp, claustrophobic, and the result of months of planning and silent labor. You see, while Fernando Araujo orchestrated the show, on the surface, another key member of the crew, Sebastián García Bolster, was hard at work engineering the underground portion of the operation. He was the team's mechanical genius. With experience in robotics and a knack for designing systems, García Bolster created not just a tunnel, but a functional escape route. One with ventilation, lighting, and even a pulley system to transport bags of stolen cash. The team had tested everything, multiple times. From digging speed and soil density to how quickly they could move stolen goods through the shaft without making noise. They even built a replica of the bank's vault door in a warehouse to rehearse the break-in. Every scenario was considered. Every second was accounted for. This wasn't a spontaneous job. It was a synchronized operation down to the heartbeat. And on the day of the heist, the plan moved like clockwork. While 3 of the robbers acted as the face of the operation inside the bank, demanding ransom, threatening violence, making dramatic phone calls to police, 2 others had already broken into the vault from below. They opened over 140 safety deposit boxes, carefully selecting the ones most likely to hold cash, valuables, and, possibly, black market documents. No rush, no panic, just precision. And then, when the time came, they slipped into the tunnel with the loot. Silent. Unseen. Meanwhile, above ground, the hostages still believed the robbers were with them. As police negotiators remained locked in back-and-forth talks with the supposed robbers inside, time was slipping through their fingers. Hours passed. Demands were made. The thieves asked for pizza, for cigarettes, and even for a getaway helicopter. It all seemed believable, chaotic, but still within the realm of what police had seen before. The public stood outside in growing numbers. Cameras rolled. Families of the hostages waited with held breath. But the reality? It was all smoke and mirrors. By the time the police decided to act, storming the bank in a tactical raid, they expected a violent confrontation. They were ready for anything. Or so they thought. What they weren't ready for was nothing. No shootout. No gunfire. No resistance. Just a room full of shaken hostages and complete silence. And most shocking of all, the robbers were nowhere to be found. The vault had been opened. Dozens of safety deposit boxes had been emptied. The floor showed signs of disturbance. But the front doors were still locked from the inside. No alarms had been triggered. No escape vehicle spotted. No tunnel discovered, at least not yet. For several long, confusing minutes, officers stood in disbelief. The robbery they thought they had under control had already ended. And the criminals? They had vanished, leaving behind only dust, empty boxes, and a mocking sense of awe. But there was one more surprise waiting for them. Inside one of the emptied vaults was a handwritten note left by the robbers. In a neighborhood of rich people, without weapons or grudges, it's just money, not love. The message was clear. This wasn't a violent act. It wasn't personal. It was about pulling off the impossible and proving that it could be done. With stunned hostages and an empty vault behind them, the authorities were left with a single question. Where did they go? Forensic teams combed every inch of the bank. Cameras were reviewed. Entry points examined. Nothing made sense until they reached the basement. There, behind a concealed wall panel and camouflaged piping, they discovered the impossible, the tunnel. Hidden beneath the floor, reinforced with wooden braces and stretching out into the city's old storm drainage system, it was a masterstroke of engineering. And it led to nowhere. At least that's how it seemed at first. The tunnel snaked through the sewer system, eventually connecting to an abandoned drainage outlet near the Rio de la Plata. That's where the trail ended. No tracks. No gear. No evidence. Just echoes of footsteps long gone. The robbers had escaped not into a getaway car or through a back door, but through the belly of the city itself. And they had taken with them not only millions in Argentine pesos and US dollars, but also jewels, gold, and items of unknown value, possibly even compromising documents hidden inside private vaults. The haul was estimated at over $20 million. In a country plagued by corruption, financial instability, and public distrust in the elite, the story hit a nerve. To some, the gang were criminals. To others, folk heroes. For weeks, the police were left chasing ghosts. The heist had been so well executed that the robbers left no fingerprints, no DNA, and no mistakes. It felt like they'd rehearsed every move. Because they had. This wasn't just a crime, it was a performance. And the city was their audience. For a while, it seemed like the perfect crime had actually succeeded. There were no arrests. No names. No trail. The gang had disappeared just as smoothly as they'd carried out the heist. But as the days turned to weeks and weeks into months, the pressure mounted, not on the police, but on the robbers themselves. You see, while the escape had gone exactly as planned, what came after didn't. Behind closed doors, cracks began to form, personal rifts, greed, jealousy. When that much money is involved, trust becomes fragile. And eventually, someone broke. It wasn't the cops. It wasn't a lead. It was love, or maybe betrayal. One of the gang members had a partner, someone who knew just a little too much. And after a personal falling out, she went to the authorities. Her confession opened the floodgates. She named names. She described the tunnel. She revealed how the entire plan had been drawn up, practiced, and perfected for months in advance. And just like that, the illusion began to crumble. Police quickly arrested several of the key players. Among them was Fernando Araujo, the quiet mastermind who had choreographed it all like a movie director. He admitted to the crime without resistance, and with a strange sense of pride. Araujo told investigators he didn't do it for the money. He called it an experiment. A social statement. A challenge. He had wanted to prove that intelligence could defeat brute force. And in what he had. By the time the dust settled, most of the robbers had been identified and arrested. Some served time. Others negotiated plea deals. And a few simply disappeared, never to be found again. Despite the arrests, the stolen money, nearly $20 million, was never fully recovered. To this day, no one knows exactly where it went. Some believe it was hidden in offshore accounts. Others think it was scattered, laundered, or even buried somewhere beneath the city. But what mattered more than the money was the message. This wasn't just a heist, it was a statement. It challenged the very notion of security, exposed the vulnerabilities in institutions believed to be impenetrable, and forced a country to question what justice really looked like. The public was divided. Some viewed the robbers as villains, others as anti-heroes, outlaws who had dared to defy a corrupt system without firing a single bullet. No one was harmed. No lives were taken. Just pride, shaken. Years later, the story would be brought to the big screen in the critically acclaimed Argentinian film El Robo del Siglo, The Heist of the Century. And it's easy to see why. The plan was bold. The execution, flawless. The getaway, cinematic. And the ending? Unresolved, mysterious, and deeply human. To this day, the Buenos Aires bank heist remains one of the most extraordinary crimes ever committed in modern history. Not because it was the bloodiest, not because it was the biggest, but because somehow it worked. And maybe that's why it still echoes, through the vaults they emptied, through the tunnel they dug, and through the questions we're still asking.